Yeah, I'm James Otter, and I design and make wooden surfboards. Got one on stage here. So let me tell you a little bit about the day job. Firstly, it doesn't often include talking in front of a huge crowd of people like today. My day job, it centres around my workshop, which is based down in a small village on the north coast of Cornwall called Porthtowan. It's where the wild Atlantic meets the granite and slate cliffs of the southwest corner of England. And as you enter the workshop, you'll be greeted by the sweet smell of cedar and the noise and energy of my excited Labrador as he comes to meet you. And all around you, you'll see various woodworking tools. There's everything from kind of a large bandsaw all the way down to tiny block planes, all of which play a part in the way that I make surfboards. To the left of you, this is what you'd see. So we've got surfboards at various stages of completion in the corner, racks of hand tools and a plethora of clamps. I'm sure the makers down here will agree you probably never can have too many clamps. So first things first, why wood? As many of you may know, a typical surfboard is made of foam and fiberglass. And this has been and still is the industry standard ever since the surfing boom of the 1960s. But about 8 or 9 years ago, I was getting really quite frustrated with my own boards that were simply not built to last, and I felt that I could make something better. As a woodworker, my natural material choice was timber. So the next challenge was finding a way of creating a surfboard that was comparable in weight, but a lot stronger than a typical board. I found the answer using a skin and frame technique, whereby there's an internal plywood frame that then has a skin of wood that covers the top and the bottom, and thin strips, you can see on the image behind me, run from the nose to the tail to build up the rails. On a quiet day, it'll just be me in the workshop, kind of getting on top of some of the custom orders, drinking plenty of tea, and you know the deal. But on a busier day, there'll be a handful of people in the workshop with me. Because as much as I love making wooden surfboards and taking the odd day to go to the beach and do some research and development, I actually love nothing more than sharing the emotions of creating your own surfboard. A couple of years ago, a chap named Steve dropped by while I was whittling away in the workshop. And he was a local surfer, and he enjoyed making things out of wood. So we got along pretty well. And after a few cups of tea, he'd asked me a question that was going to change my path forever. He said, "Do you think you could help me make my own wooden surfboard?" And I was like, I didn't expect that to happen. Crikey, yeah, what a challenge, though. Okay, yeah, let's do that, Steve. So over the next couple of months, Steve would drop past on a Wednesday afternoon, and he'd get set into making his own board with me to help him there at every step of the way. And to start with, I was really quite nervous, actually, about sharing this knowledge that I built up over the kind of previous 3 years. But as we grew to know each other, I actually found that sharing in the fun of making something, especially a surfboard, made me incredibly happy. And some advice from my dad rung pretty loud in my ears. I remember him saying to me, "Stick to what you enjoy, and you'll end up doing something you love." So if I was enjoying this experience as much as it clearly appeared Steve was, it was something that I was going to have to keep in my life. So from there, I worked out a structure of 5 days in which you can handcraft a wooden surfboard so that I could then share the experience I'd had with Steve with other people. But the thing is that I remember when I was making my first surfboard and I was planing the rails, the excitement and the anticipation of what I was making and what I was going to be doing with it grew to a point that I'd never had before when I was making anything else. And what I hadn't bargained for was that when I was to share that experience with other people was the extent to which it might affect them. Let me introduce you to Ian. Ian came down from his one-bedroom flat in London to come and spend the week with me making his own board. And before he came down for the course, he sent me a few emails to ask if there were tools that he could learn about and practice with to prepare. And I understood this to mean that he was just really excited, really keen, couldn't wait to get started. But actually, when we met on the Monday morning, it seemed actually his desire to learn and understand, it came from a nervousness and a lack of confidence, which I felt was something that we'd have to work on through that week. And don't get me wrong, Ian brought some great cards to the table because he was a web coder, so he was really good at meeting deadlines. So I felt if I outlined the deadlines clearly enough, he'd be able to knuckle down and get things done. But his problem then was that most of the deadlines he was used to meeting, he was sat at his desk. So over the week, he had 5 days spent on his feet. It took its toll to the point that it really pushed him out of his comfort zone. And I've seen Ian several times since, and now consider him quite a good friend, actually. And I've spoken to him about his experience, and it seems that for him there was a definite turning point. As we move away from the construction phase, where we spend 3 days gluing everything together, and we moved into the shaping phase, he became much more comfortable and familiar with the tools, because they're the ones he'd been practicing with at home. I got to see him kind of grow in confidence, and he became much happier in what he was doing. And he needed less of my reassurance as well. He began to understand that feedback loop of making things, where you're not necessarily guided by your sense of sight, like you might expect. You begin to trust in your sense of touch. And that gave Ian a real wow moment. He started to get excited about what he was making and the fact he was going to be riding waves on it. And so, needless to say, he was pretty blown away by the look and feel of his finished board, and we rushed to the nearest beach. And despite the windy, rainy, sloppy waves, we got in and we had a lot of fun. I'm not sure if Ian was an overly confident person before I met him. He may have just been unsure of his making skills, but I'd like to think that during that week I was able to send some encouragement and confidence his way, because since then he's actually gone on to make some pretty big life-changing decisions. First of all, making the board for him opened up a lot of ambition, not necessarily to carry on making surfboards, but just to carry on making and doing things with his hands, spending less time sitting at his computer. And the second change is that he's now moved away from London, all the way down to Cornwall with his wife, where he can enjoy being in the ocean and have the kind of the healthy outdoor lifestyle that he'd always dreamed of. Another person I'd like to tell you about is Luca. Luca's a good friend of mine from Switzerland, and it's not necessarily the place you'd expect a keen surfer to come from, but sure enough, he's keen to get in the sea at any point. And a couple of months ago, Luca hopped on a flight to London, grabbed a train, and came down into Cornwall to stay with us for 2 weeks. And when he arrived, we were planning our first few surf trips, and he was lucky that when he arrived, there were some days of sunshine and some really good waves, so we kind of made the most of it, got stuck in. And about 2 days into that, after a couple of days it was, he said, "Do you think, James, that we could make a board together during my second week here?" And I was like, "Oh, Christ, okay. Hang on, I've got to find 3 days in there somewhere to do all the preparation, to get all the materials ready for you. But as long as you're happy to put some long days in the workshop, then yeah, okay, we can do it." And he agreed, so we got started. It seems it was in Luca's nature to keep on kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. He moved the goalposts that I was quite familiar with during the week course quite a lot. First of all, he asked if we could create a different skin layout for him, which is the way that the boards look on the top and bottom. And I kind of thought, okay, yeah, it's different, it's new, it's going to be more complicated than something I've done before, but if you're happy to put in some hard work, then yes, we can do it. So we got pretty busy. And then he asked, "Do you think during the build we could make a time-lapse video of my experience?" And I thought, that's a really good idea, that's a great idea. So we messed around with some cameras, but sadly, we only had 3 hours of battery life each day. So no video to show you, sorry. But then he hit me with the last challenge about halfway through the build. He just kind of looked me in the face and he said, "I want to burn the rails to turn them black." And a little confused, I kind of said, hang on a minute, Luca. So you want to spend all this time with me making a surfboard from scratch, and then you're going to take a blowtorch to it? Yep, that was what he wanted. So on his last day, I had a workshop course with some people making belly boards and hand planes. And he headed outside with his finished board under his arm, blowtorch in the other hand, and a box of matches. And Luca, he just had such confidence in his abilities that he pushed me out of my comfort zone. And where I normally spend a week with people in the workshop, kind of helping them reconnect with what it feels like to make and create things, Luca taught me that as much as I try and keep them on course with their creations, that's exactly what they are, their creations. And I love sharing what I do, making wooden surfboards, to help people reconnect and remember what it feels like to make something. Because I think making and creating is actually an intrinsic part in all of us that many of us have forgotten about. All we really need is the support, the encouragement, and the confidence to get started again. Thank you.